So there was a lot of work to try to find out about one of these soldiers. And I found a museum that had several books. I probably got 20 books that I read about for that company. And move ahead to what Jason was talking about, 2012, we did the Heroes Among Us. Everybody, has everybody seen that? We have are you a student?
Yeah.
All right. Are you a student?
No.
No?
I'm a faculty member.
Faculty member, okay. All right. So I worked with Jason, did the photography, most of the photography. I did a few interviews, but mostly it was the photography. And this was one of our veterans, James Cortez. And the problem with what I was doing in 2002 era was I had heard that the papers had been burned. So you couldn't find out anything in Kansas City. So when I started on this, move ahead to when I started on this project, I found a lady in Indiana, and she said that's not true. Most of those, maybe they did burn, but they had copies. So she said if you fill out this form, it'll take 6 months to a year, and more than likely you'll get your information. So I filled it out. It was a Freedom of Information Act. And you had to, whatever it was, she helped me fill it out. 6 months later, I got a document from the government, and I only had 24 hours to open it and read it. So I opened it, saved it, printed it out, and it was about 35 pages. So I learned a lot of information that no one in my family ever had known about, but most of the people had passed it, had known it. So that was sort of the downside. The other downside is I had these two main characters, but I couldn't find any of the people that served with them, that actually served with them. Let's start with Bud, because that's where my story actually began, was with this book. That was a Last Photographer series I co-authored with Annie Johnson. She's a teacher she lives in Summersville. And we did 4 of these books 3 were Finley Taylor, and 1 was Jim Comstock. And this is, I'm gonna see if you can see what that is.
What it is?
Yeah, what it is, what it says, or tell me a little bit about it. We'll look at it first, and then we'll talk about it. So this lady became known as Tattoo Terry. We couldn't find out very much about her. But we did a little research, and the thing with research, when I was here for Miss King and Mr. DeRose, we had to use the card catalogs. We didn't have such thing as the internet. But we got online and we did a little research. And do any of you know anything about this? What can you tell us? Nothing?
It's like a military tattoo to me.
Okay. Well, it's an upside down horseshoe. So what does that mean?
It's either good luck or bad luck.
Yeah, so it's upside down as running out of luck. Running out of luck. And Terry. So we just named her Tattoo Terry. After the book came out, we found out this woman was going in a store, and she's like, oh my gosh, there's my grandma. Oh. And she's a nurse at Charleston. But she said that this was her aunt or grandma, something like that. And the thing was, women didn't have tattoos in the 40s. They would if they were in the military, or sort of like circus and sideshows and stuff like that. But she got mad at her dad and ran off to California and got married. and got the tattoo. And then later she moved back to West Virginia. But I was trying to find a lot of these soldiers. And I had thousands and thousands of pictures of World War II soldiers. And I put something on Facebook and I said, hey, I'm trying to find maybe somebody that knows who these soldiers are. And that led me to Goldie. And someone wrote a story about the largest clothespin factory in the world. Has anybody heard of that? So that was in Richwood. And Goldie worked at the clothespin factory. So I got the lady said, now she won't answer your phone if you unless she knows who you are. So here's a picture of her and Bud, her fiance. She was 17, he was 28. And she said, give me your phone number, and then I'm sure she would like to talk to me. So we made connections, and she started going through the pictures, and she says, I have a lot of letters that Bud wrote to me. And I said, well, I'd like to see one. And she said, well, my daughter has them in Florida. And I said, okay. I said, I'm going to leave my pictures with you. Maybe you can go through and identify them for me. So when I come back a couple days later, she said, I talked to my daughter, and she's sending the letters. So one of the things I've found when I interview people is be persistent and not to give up. So some of the people we interviewed, it took a year to interview. But these are all of Goldie and Bud's letters. It was over 300 pages. And of course, I'm not a big reader all the time. So I had my secretary go through and I said, there's a lot of love letters in here. I want you to find the love letters. Find the things that women would like. And then, wasn't long after that I talked to Goldie that I got a phone call. My son Jared and I had went to interview. It was one of the pictures in the Heroes Among Us. And the family called and they said, we've got 2 boxes of letters and pictures that were in this corn crib that's been falling in for 40 years. And it's just, we tore it down, we found all these letters, and we thought maybe you all might like it. So we went to get them, and so these are all copies of the Bud and Goldie letters. And I'll let you guys after, you can walk around, but these are all the actual letters that Junior sent. And in my story, I wanted to have 2 characters that were completely opposite. So Bud lived for Goldie. That's all, he had to be back home to see Goldie. And Junior had lived a really tough life. He lived in Landisburg. Does anybody know where Landisburg is? You probably know where Babcock State Park is. So it's maybe 10 minutes from Babcock State Park. His mother died when he was 15, and he left home to Radford, Virginia. I wasn't able to find out why he moved to Radford, Virginia. It's about 2 hours drive. But in the letters, he said, Daddy, I'm working at a gas station. There's plenty of girls here. Send my brothers. And, so he was happy-go-lucky guy. He was always out having fun. And then he somehow he got back and he signed up for the Army at 17. And for him, it was hey, this is fun. I get to travel and get good food. And that was one of the things we found in James Cortez. I didn't pick this up because of the interviews that we had that were so powerful. But he said there was 10 of us kids, and we were poor. We didn't have money. He said, I didn't even know what cereal was. So we had basic training, and all these guys come in, and he said, I didn't want to make an ass of myself. And then he says, oh, you did say I could cuss, right? So it makes that makes it even more personable of his personality. But back to Cruel Was the Way. So my movie starts with this. This is the second scene actually of the movie.
My intent was to block it out. If I refused to let it in, I wouldn't be able to remember it. And if I refused to remember it, I would be okay. Right? Wrong. It's in there. I looked at the dead Germans. I looked, but I did not see. I glanced at the dead GIs, but I refused to really see. Dead civilians were sometimes there, and cows and horses blown to bits. I looked and did not see, but I did see. My thoughts was always wipe it out, forget it, and never look back. It worked pretty well 90% of the time for almost 50 years, or so I thought for almost 50 years. I never hit the enter key. I looked and did not see, but I did see.
So this was my weak point is editing, and you can hear there's sound. There was people talking in the background and whatnot. And one of the expenses for the movie is going to be about $20,000 for a good editor, 3 to 5 months. And I've worked on a few movies with Josh Stewart is one of the better known actors in this. If any of you heard of Josh? He's worked with Tom Hanks and Brad Pitt, and he's from Diana. I took his pictures when he was in high school.
His dad went to school here.
Yep, Reggie. And his, the guy that did the veterans that did this. Who has, does anybody not have one of these? These are compliments of Jason in the library if you don't have one.
You sure? Sure.
So this is what we did in,
As long as everybody else gets covered.
we've got,
Okay.
so this was a year-long project.
We have one.
We've got one.
I have one marked, but it's just in a just a case. I don't need the case. Keep that for somebody else. I do have the it's just instructions. I thought I did.
You don't have one? So Robert Tennell and his brother Jeff was the one, they produced the movie. They were in charge of doing the editing. You know, we went through and did all the videos and the pictures, and they made the movie. They were the one that put it together, that made it look good. And I don't have that ability. That'll be one of the things that someone else will do at the end. But we were working on the movie, and Robert Tennell said, You're from Webster County. You know Josh Stewart. I said, yeah, I know Josh. Took his pictures. And he said, well, we're doing a movie in Webster County in September. And I said, oh, that's cool. Who's doing the photography? I'd like to talk to him. And he said, well, it's a low budget film. We're not going to have a photographer for it. And I said, low budget and you're not having a photographer? And he said, no. I said, well, I'll do it for free. I'd just like to see what it's like to be on a movie set. So he says, well, I don't know. You know, most of these people are from California, and they're just different breed. You know, it's more or less what he said. So I kept after him, and a couple months, he's like, we had a meeting, and Josh said that he wanted you to do the photography. You know, he had a meeting with everybody. So there was 2 or 3 things that happened during the movie. We weren't allowed to talk about it. You know, we had to sign something till after it happened. But one night, they got the prop truck stuck up in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, man, we're gonna be behind. How are we gonna, what are we gonna do? And I told Josh, I said, well, I can go back to your house and get change or something. And he said, Dad doesn't have them. And that day I'd made senior pictures, and I said, well, I made pictures of this guy, Tom Coger. It's a logger here. He's pretty well known in the area. And he said, man, I just don't want people knowing all about this and stuff. And it was like 11 o'clock at night, and he said, well, I guess we'll have to. And my cell phone had no service, and one of these guys from California had a cell phone with extended service. So I called his house, and his wife, they're in bed, and she's like, what in the world are you doing calling at 11 o'clock at night? We go to bed at 9 o'clock. We get up early. So we're like, well, it's sort of an emergency. And finally Josh said, well, tell Tom that, what we need. So he drives out there and gets us out. And then a couple other days, one of the lenses kept fogging up. And it was a specific lens. When you do a scene, they have to blend in together. And they couldn't get one for 2 days, shipped into West Virginia. And I said, I'll get one. One of my friends had one. So I drove that night and went and got it and stuff. So after the movie was over, Robert Tennell said, boy, you got us out of a couple binds. He said, those people from Hollywood said, no, we don't need no local yokels there that think they know anything. So so it was pretty fun thing. It was memorable. So that's sort of my experience with movies, and this is my first go at it on my own. So these are a few. Have you read very much?
Yeah, the book,
Yeah, you read some of it.
Oh.
Have you read it? Yeah, you've probably read it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But these are a couple.
Read it.
These are a couple of the things that. One of the things is, now, do you know anything at all about World War II?
I know some things because my brother's in a big history.
So what time period was it? Do you know that?
Put me on the spot.
Was it the 80s?
It's like a little bit further back.
A little bit further back. How about 40s?
The 40s.
So it was in the 40s. And I've studied a lot of human nature teaching college kids. Now I teach 7th, 8th, 9th grade kids. And the one thing that I've read with these letters, these books, is teenagers are the same. The one thing that's really different, other than the internet, is the radio. They listened to the Grand Ole Opry. They didn't have anything called rock and roll. They all listened, and that was sort of interesting there. But they were, they flirted with the opposite sex. They showed off. They carried on. They fought. So it's pretty much the same. But this is one of the stories that was found when this guy went in a nursing home. His daughter found this journal that nobody knew anything about. And his was the hardest at it because they were also what I call wow. And we ended up keeping about 40 of his stories. And they were real short. They were, daily journals. November 12th, 1942, met Julie Nagy. Her brother is in the same regiment as I am. Went to visit Mom. She sternly asked me, why did you take out so little death insurance? I hope to get more money when you get killed. I'm not going back home again. So that's definitely when you have kids that are listening to that's usually talking and they're, what did he say? So my intentions is to get these best stories and teach them about things that happened. How many of you are familiar with this picture? It was voted the most famous picture of the 20th century. And it was actually, how many times did they raise that flag? That same flag?
Yeah.
They had 2 flags.
Yes.
So they had a smaller flag. They had a photographer there, but the guy in charge wanted that flag, and they said, no, the flag has to stay. So as they were bringing the other flag, Joe Rosenthal, the photographer for life, he was climbing up the mountain, and the story was told to me by Woody Williams, and he's the last living Medal of Honor in West Virginia. He's the only Medal of Honor winner in West Virginia we have. And he was about 1,000 yards away, and he said, I started hearing roars and shooting, and I turned around and I seen the flag go up. So that gives me chills just thinking about that we still have someone that was there that seen the flag go up. He said this was like a pipe, because everything was blown up and they used that for drinking water. And it wasn't for, I think it was two or 3 weeks after that the United States took over the island. They didn't even take it over that day. And Woody earned his Medal of Honor that same day. So that was an experience, being able to listen to him talk about that. This picture was sort of hard to see, and when we're through you can look. But this guy was a photographer at Iwo Jima. He was one of the first photographers there after they dropped the atomic bomb. His name was Dutch Bray. I've got one other. Are we good? Is everybody getting tired? No. I want to show you one video. It's not edited, but this was one guy that I met. I met his daughter that had written a book, and we went to Pittsburgh and we interviewed her dad. And he's one of the few that we have an actor for. He's the only one of the soldiers that we have an actor for. And I think the actors are going to be the hardest, the soldiers are going to be the hardest part, because they've got to be tough. So this is Albert DeFazio.
Okay.
Can we see?
Yeah.
It's about 5 minutes.
We were replacements for the 36th Infantry Division under the command of General Mark Clark's 5th Army. So we traveled at night and got to our base below the mountain. 36th wasn't there yet. So they told us, well, we're going to be here a while. Dig yourself the foxhole, because we're going to be overnight. I says, yeah, dig a foxhole. I said, even a fox wouldn't live in that hole, I said. So anyhow, we laid all night, and it was cold too, January. 36 still didn't come in. So finally they did. And we climbed on top of the mountain. I don't remember the name of the mountain. And we were allowed to pitch our pump tents of 2 to each pen. We put 2 together for heat. So the next morning, they got us up. We got out. That was January the 14th. It was my birthday. I just turned 19 years of age. So then they got us all together and said, get ready. We're going to put, we had a new captain that took over our outfit. He was a first lieutenant, and he says, most of you fellows will be killed before I even learn your name. Well, that didn't go down too good. He should have never said that. I don't know why. Then that's when he made his rounds. And that's when he said, you two guys look so much alike, I can't tell you apart. That's why everybody looks like somebody. He said, well, get ready. We're going down and attack at the Rapido River at Monte Cassino. So we got ready. They lined us all up, and they put us and lined, and another one put his hands on his back. The right hand went on his right side, the one on the left side was like bananas in there. So we started down the hillside, got down to the bottom near the Rapido River, and they had footbridges across there, made of wood, nothing to hold on to. All of a sudden, it was quiet. All of a sudden, all hell broke loose. Oh my God. Artillery came in and hit us right in the middle. I looked to my right, and every second or so, a bomb would come in there, and I'd see a pile of bodies together, mangled, killed. You know, it was 2 or 3 or 4 on top of each other. A seconds in, another one, and another. I said, I got to get out of here. So I got up and went towards the river, jumped on the bridge, and got across on the lake and laid down beside. And we couldn't go nowhere. Everything was coming in there. Gunfire, everything. It was terrible. I was scared. That's my first time in combat. So finally orders come back and said, go back to our original position, which we did. We got on top of the mountain. I just sat down and I put my head on my legs, and I just could not believe what I saw and what I went through. I put this over and over. I thought it was a dream or something. I had gotten nightmares for a long time.
Okay. So they're all like that. The stories are all like that. Let me read one that makes, what do you have to do in a movie like that? Do you have to show them all like that? Do we have to have all bad stuff?
No.
So we have to throw in a little bit of funny stuff too, right? So let me find. So this fellow was from Sand Fork. I'll say probably most of you probably know him. Warren Matheny. Okay. Have you guys read any of Warren's books? So let me read one of Warren's stories. So it's called. Let's see, 191. I had never gone into town by myself. No one else wanted to go, saying it was too hot. I was bored of tent life, so I went off. When I arrived in town, I found what looked to be a fine business section. I soon noticed a long line of servicemen. The line started on the sidewalk ahead of me. The line extended across the street and up some wide masonry steps to an impressive building with stately pillars. An Army MP stood by the door. This intrigued me, so I quickly got in line. When joining the Navy, there are 2 things that you learn quickly. Number 1, if you see a piece of litter, dispose of it properly. But if it's too large to lift, then paint it. Number 2, if you see a line of servicemen, then get in line, because if it wasn't for something good, they would not be there. Needless to say, I joined to share in what was ahead. The sun was hot and the line moved very, very slowly. I was determined to tough it out. I made it to the steps when the soldier ahead of me looked back over his shoulder to see how long the line was. I took the opportunity to ask what the line was for. He looked at me so shocked, as though his eyes and ears were deceiving him. In a somewhat questionable voice, he said, "You mean to tell me that you've been standing in the hot sun all this time and you don't even know what for?" I said that I got in line from force of habit. He then informed me that this was a U.S. government house of prostitution. Now I thought that my ears were deceiving me. Our government that we pay our taxes to and risk our lives for is in this kind of business. Later in Palermo, well, that's something else. So one of the things about a low-budget film is you don't have $17 million for the opening act like they did for Saving Private Ryan. So you have to come up with things that, like the Mr. DeFazio's story and some of the other stories that we can understand in our mind without all the bells and whistles. There was another one that was you remember any, Jason, from Mr. Cortez? You remember?
Mostly what I remember of Mr. Cortez was not any funny stories. They were mostly,
it was
the
pretty
one that sticks
powerful.
out the most is, I believe he was on the beach in Normandy when he tells about that. It's pretty emotional.
That's the most powerful story in the book. So he was crying in the interview, and he said there was boys with arms missing and legs missing, and he said, I can't get that out of my head. They were crying for their mommies. And that's about as true as war. I think that was probably the most powerful story we had. But it really, kids today have no real idea what it was about, I don't think. And I've talked to his daughters about it, about using it, and they, they agreed that it would be good to show it. And a lot of the three of the older characters, Mr. DeFazio and Mr. Cortez, we'll start with them as an old person telling the story, and then we'll put a young soldier in their place for one of the scenes. It won't be the Normandy scene, but some of the other scenes. So it makes for So what I need you guys to do is get us some recruits. That's going to be our toughest challenge, is the soldiers. The girls always want to get dressed up, and we've got a rosy scene. How many of you know the differences in rosies? There was different rosies. Does anybody know that? No?
Just the riveter.
So that's what we always hear, but they did a lot of different things. So some measured gunpowder. There was different heights. There was actually the riveter. The really small, the really tiny one would go inside the plane, and then you would have one that was stronger, would be on the outside and rivet. And so they worked as a team. Do you remember that, any? Talking about that? I only heard it at Glenville here, one of the women, and I've never found it and not been able to find it online. But that woman was a Rosie, and she told us that story.
I believe some were actually involved working on the atomic bomb, I believe.
Yeah, they told them after they was measuring 2 ounces of gunpowder, and after the bomb had been dropped, these guys come in suits and said, "You ladies were building the atomic bomb." They had no idea what they were doing.
My mother was in a team of a riveter and a bucker. The other one was a bucker.
Well, they built things. They
worked
so
on
much
planes.
stuff. They took over. They really took over what guys did that were in the war. So it was a big part of the war too. But in the one scene I have for the Rosies it's more like a basic training where the guys are still green. They haven't seen war yet, and they're just out having fun. And they go into like the USO, and there's some Rosies, and they have real tiny ones, and then the bigger ones. But the guys come in and they say, the little ones, they, "What are you little girls doing in here?" And then the bigger Rosies say, "We'll beat your ass," So we'll make it that'll be one of the more funny scenes. That's about all I have. I want to show you a few things that, well, actually this has a lot to do with the opening of the book. With the editor, we had to decide if the book was going to be nonfiction or fiction, and she said, "I think nonfiction is the way to go, because if you try to win awards, it's going to be more historical accurate. But if you do a movie, then you can do based on a true story, and then you can add little bits of things." So this was one of the address books, and both soldiers are shot at the beginning of the movie. So we know both get shot, but we don't know till the end which one lives and which one dies. But in this journal, it has this soldier was shot. Junior Smith was shot on June 28th, and the day that was marked off was June 26th. And he went overseas in June, so he marked in his little address book, little phone number book. And I went through the whole book, got online, tried to find contacts that was in this book. And I was able to find a guy named Warren Godwa, and I found his daughter on Facebook. And she shared a story. And then the other person that I found was Weldon Green's son, and he wrote one of the letters to the family. And I found his obituary, looked up the son's name, and called him. And he said, "Oh, I'd love to see the telegram." So I sent him the telegram, and I said, "You wouldn't happen to have any interviews of your dad?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "My sister made she just digitized it. It was a cassette tape from the early '80s. So it documented where he was at for one of the soldiers. So it sort of pieced it together with where they were." And then Porterfield, this has been broken. It's got to be super glued. But this was a statue of Jesus that he found on a table. The whole town was blown to bits, and this was on a table, and he brought it home with him. And students complain about how long does it have to be. So my general rule is 10 pages would be, that's about average. And they're, I can't do a 10-page paper. So I said, well, you can have pictures and whatnot. So how many pages were cut out of the book? Or words from the original book did the editor cut? 30,000 words. And this was a journal, it was 119 pages. The lady became a Rosie, but this was her journal at West Virginia Wesleyan as a freshman in 1938. And I included it because I thought it would show the normality before the war. And she says, I think we should eliminate that and possibly make that another book. And because it really, she said, we need to really stick to World War II. And that was good because I had a lot of other stuff. And that's what you need, somebody to say, no, that's not right. That's what your teachers are for, to tell you. So,
how long did the editing process take once you decided you needed the editor?
Well, I was finished in June, I thought. And then she started in late July. 2 months, about 2 months. She was pretty fast because most books you like to get them finished, but I was really pushing to get it finished so if something happened to Goldie that she could see the book because she's now 99 and she was able to see it. They were able to read it to her. So then I had another obstacle. My book designer, it took him almost 3 months. We didn't get it out till in January. It took him almost 3 months because he's a full-time teacher too. So there's always something to it. And I'm not big on computers. These are my stories for my script, my rough draft. And we actually have 77. A 90-minute movie is, how many scenes? You learned that yet?
It depends on the film. Usually,
so 90-minute film's about 36 scenes.
Yeah.
About 36 scenes.
I was like, it's 30 something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and some might be a minute, some might be 5 minutes, but on average 3 minutes a scene. And for every 1 minute that goes in a movie, an hour was filmed. So that's why you have so much editing that takes several months. Okay. All right, ask me some questions.
So what's your projection date for the movie?
I want to film in the fall, but if I don't raise the money, I want the movie to be good, so it'll be postponed until I'm sure that it's going to be good. I don't want to put something out that's going to be bad.
Go ahead.
How many actors are you looking for, and what age groups, what genders?
There's going to be 17 to 20 soldiers that have speaking roles. And that might be some that's in basic and then ones. We hope to do the battle scenes in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, which is where they do reenactments for World War II. So all those guys would already have the uniforms. Now they wouldn't be actors, but if I had this unit of everybody with uniforms, and Jason's one of the actors, then we can put him in with them. And then we have to have a demolition guy, the guy that does the explosions. He has to be, he has to do that. Like where they have people blown up, they actually have a pan that's like this, a pan that's like this tall in the ground that they blow up, I guess, where they actually blow up, and then the guys there aft, from what Terry, the guy that's worked on several movies, it's sort of my World War II expert on films. One of the soldiers, when he was brought home, they couldn't take his casket through the front door because there was a wall behind there. So I don't know how they got furniture in unless they built onto the house. So they measured a window and they took the casket through a window. And that was sort of, I guess, common. That they had to, they had to wait the night before and then it would be moved to the church. So the church scene will have old people, young people, kids. There'll be a variety. And the challenge with that is the clothes. With guys, suits will be okay, but the women will have to find the dresses and things of that nature. And then we'll have Goldie's 18th birthday party, which will be a lot of young girls, some guys that will be dancing, a band, and the Rosie and the basic training. Let's see, what else?
You're using college.
Yeah, that was my point of coming to some of the colleges, was to get the college age kids. High school kids would be okay, but if they're under 18, you've got to be on set with them. It's a lot more things that you have to worry about.
What's your pay these people?
Huh? They'll be, probably $100 a day for the actors. They'll be young and it'll give them experience. But one of my most expensive people is going to be my hair and makeup. This woman works on Hollywood movies. I worked with her on one movie, and she came in Thanksgiving 2 years ago. We did a test run with Jared and Adam, Jared's fiance, wife, and some other people, and she did the hair from that era and makeup, and it makes a difference because I did another girl with Goldie, and her makeup didn't look right. So it does make, she's $375 a day plus $75 for your makeup fee. And I said, is that all? Is that just you? You won't need anybody? She said, I have an assistant that gets $250 a day. So I think that's $7,000–8,000 for 2 weeks. Film usually 2 weeks. You try to do everything in 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
What's your projected budget for the film?
I want 200. It's 200,000. I think I can do it for maybe 50 to 70,000, but 200 is what I'd like to get.
200 was Bronson was a $230,000 film, and Bronson's a masterpiece. So you can
Which one?
Bronson. It's a Tom Hardy movie. It's a boxing movie.
I haven't seen that one.
It's a fantastic micro-budget film.
Yeah. Bronson. That's the name of it.
Yes, it is a masterclass in how to create a low-budget film.
I'll have to look that up. And it was what? 250?
Yeah, it was 230,000.
Well, 10 years ago, Josh Stewart said that the movie The Hunted was 150,000. So I'm figuring maybe 50,000 more.
And of course, you're going to do this while you're teaching full-time?
Well, I got to pass my praxis.
Well, you know where I'm going, but yeah.
But I took it. I won't find it. You don't know for a month. But in the fall, that's what I haven't missed. I never miss any work. I've been there 4 years and I don't miss any work. So
I'm thinking you wrote this book, did all these interviews, did all this work, and were a full-time teacher.
yeah.
You're a stress junkie, Mark.
My pastor said, how many hours did it take you to write this book? And I said, 5 years. But it is, students, you know, 10 minutes a day. You had to have me do it, Dr. Tedford, 10 minutes a day, writing 10 minutes a day. It's just like getting on your cell phone. You know, you're on your, and I looked at mine and I didn't think I was on it 3 hours a day, but I spend 3 hours a day on a cell phone. So you use so much time on cell phones that, you know.
Where is the majority of filming going to take place? Do you know yet?
The battle scenes will be in Chambersburg, which there'll be about 20, and that'll be probably 3 or 4 days. Richwood, Terry Whittington, my co-director, lives in Beckley, and him and his wife's house is a Sears Roebuck house. It was built in the 30s. Everything is in it, the furniture, the kitchen, everything in it is from the 30s. So that's where we'll do several scenes inside the house with the family. Richwood, I've got 3 train scenes, and we'll probably do those in cast. One of the scenes, Goldie and Bud, their trains passed at midnight. I was like, my gosh, that's a Hollywood scene there, just where they see each other. And maybe one train you won't actually be in the train, but the other you'll, you know, Goldie said she didn't fall asleep, but the guy had just been married that was sitting beside of her, and he fell asleep on her shoulder. So I mean, just, you know, so that, you know, it's the implied things and not the explosions. Another movie I watched, and there's no battle scenes, and it's won several awards, was The English Patient. And there's no battle scene. You know, the one woman got blown up, but there's no battle scenes, and it's more about the emotional side of it. So that's my. Another fella I talked to on Facebook, he just got a contract with CBS to do a movie and a 6 to 8 episode, the same unit that Junior is, his company, the Texas 36, but his is all Mexican. So I sent him a book and I said, please give to CBS. You know, they do like NCIS and all these shows. They do 2 or 3 of them every year. They come up with something new, and you just never know what they're like. So it's a lot of luck too. It's like you just have to be in the right place at the right time. And the same thing with our funding. I think we're just going to have to find somebody that's really wants to preserve the veterans. Appreciate you guys having me.
It's a nice book, Mark.
And I wasn't the best. It wasn't the best.
Makes me feel we did well.
I wasn't the best student, but I was persistent.
You're a good student, Mark.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing more about, you know, how this goes and whatnot. But let's give Mark a hand. We appreciate you coming out, and hopefully